The neon-lit underbelly of Station Nexus 7 buzzed with an unusual energy. Zark watched the massive holographic contract board through all four of his eyes, his scaled hide bristling with unease. The message that dominated the central display had sent the entire Mercenary quarter into chaos. Note IC. By order of the Mercenary Guild Council, all contracts on human targets are hereby permanently voided. No new contracts will be accepted. Violation of this protocol will result in immediate guild expulsion and forfeit of all credits. The veteran Draconid assassin's claws traced the twisted scar tissue along his neck, a souvenir from his last encounter with a human target. Around him, the station's famous Red Market district had erupted into a cacophony of arguments and disbelief. Species from across the galaxy, some built for combat, others evolved for stealth, all united in their outrage at this unprecedented restriction. "They can't do this," bellowed a massive Krovax warrior, his armored plates gleaming under the harsh station lights. "Humans are soft scientists and merchants. They're not even a warrior species." Zark let out a low, humorless laugh that drew several sets of eyes his way, spoken like someone who's never hunted one. He pulled up his personal interface, displaying the latest statistics that had led to this decision. 98% fatality rate for mercenaries taking human contracts this cycle. 98%. The numbers told only part of the story. Zark had watched the security footage from failed hits, had seen the way humans transformed from peaceful researchers and traders into something else entirely when threatened. They didn't just fight back. They evolved their tactics in real time, learning and adapting with terrifying speed. A sleek Myraxian information broker slithered forward, her crystalline scales refracting the neon lights. "The last successful hit on a human target was 3 cycles ago," she whispered, her voice like wind through glass. "And the hunter who did it never made it back to collect the bounty. They found his ship drifting in deep space 6 months later, every system intact, but no sign of the killer." Zark nodded grimly. The story had become something of a legend in their circles. The human target had been eliminated, yes, but somehow their family had tracked the assassin across 17 systems, not for justice or revenge. They simply wanted to understand how he'd done it, to make sure it never happened again. The learning never stopped with humans, even in death. "Look at these damage reports," another mercenary called out, projecting footage from recent failed attempts. The assembled crowd watched as human scientists turned research equipment into weapons, as human maintenance workers created elaborate traps from simple tools, as human children acted as lookouts with an efficiency that put professional surveillance teams to shame. The most disturbing footage came from a high-profile hit just last month. The target, a human mining engineer, had been cornered in their habitat module. The assassin, using top-grade stealth technology, had everything planned perfectly. But somehow, the human had known. They'd redirected the habitat's air recyclers, flooding the module with colored smoke that revealed the assassin's outline. The engineer had then used mining equipment to weld the module's doors shut, trapping themselves inside with the killer. They found the assassin's body 3 days later. The human had survived. Zark closed the footage as the council's full report scrolled across the contract board. Their analysis was clear. Humans were unlike any other species in the galaxy. They didn't have natural weapons or armor. They weren't particularly fast or strong, but they were relentless, innovative, and most importantly, they worked together in ways that defied conventional tactical analysis. The real problem, Zark finally spoke to the crowd, isn't that they fight back. It's that they learn. Every failed attempt makes them stronger. Every tactic we use becomes their new defense. They don't just share information. They improve upon it. He gestured to his scars again. "I got these trying to take out a human diplomat. Simple job, or so I thought. But they had studied every previous assassination attempt on their species, had countermeasures I'd never seen before. And now, he laughed again, this time with a note of genuine respect. Now those countermeasures are standard protocol in every human settlement. The message on the board flickered, adding one final line that made even the most hardened hunters shift uncomfortably. Remember, they're not just defending themselves. They're learning how to hunt us. The restricted archives of Station Nexus 7 held many secrets, but none more valuable than the complete record of the Hayes contract. Kizark's clearance as a senior guild member granted him access to the sealed files, though his hands trembled slightly as he initiated the playback. The holographic display crackled to life, showing Dr. Amanda Hayes in her lab at the Outer Rim Research Station Epsilon. She moved with the casual confidence typical of humans, seemingly unaware that her image had been captured by a contract scout. The timestamp showed this footage was taken just hours before the first bounty was posted. Initial contract value, 10 million credits. The archive's automated voice intoned. Target, Dr. Amanda Hayes, xenobiologist. Special note, subject has made breakthrough in cross-species medical treatment. Dark watched as the footage shifted to the first attempt. A novice hunter, armed with the latest neural toxins, had managed to infiltrate the research station's ventilation system. The plan was simple. Release the toxin while the target slept. Quick, clean, untraceable. The video feed showed the hunter's point of view as they approached the sleeping quarters. Then, unexpectedly, a warning klaxon blared. The station's AI announced, "Atmospheric anomaly detected. Emergency protocols engage." They had installed molecular scanners in their air filtration. Kazark muttered to himself, remembering the reports. Modified medical equipment to detect foreign substances. The target had already prepared for this possibility. The next footage came from 3 days later. The bounty had doubled to 20 million credits. This time, a team of 3 elite hunters attempted a direct approach during the station's night cycle. The video showed them breaching an auxiliary airlock, their movements perfect, their timing impeccable. Then the lights went out. Smart, Kazark nodded as he watched. They cut their own power. Humans see better in complete darkness than most species expect. The night vision feed showed what happened next. Station personnel, led by Dr. Hayes herself, had set up kill zones in every major corridor. Not with advanced weapons, but with improvised tools and repurposed research equipment. One hunter was incapacitated by a makeshift electromagnetic pulse generated from medical imaging hardware. Another was trapped in rapidly hardening medical foam originally designed for setting broken bones. The bounty hit 30 million credits, then 40 million. With each failed attempt, the humans adapted their defenses. They began wearing modified research suits that could detect the electrical signatures of stealth fields. They developed new security protocols based on Earth's historical siege warfare. Play final attempt. Kazark commanded the archive. The screen showed Dr. Hayes in her lab again, but this time she was different. Gone was the casual academic. In her place stood someone else, a predator. She looked directly into the camera of the dead hunter at her feet. "I want to thank you all," she spoke clearly, her voice steady. "Each attempt has provided invaluable data for my research. You see, I've been studying why humans are different from other species, why we evolved as persistence predators rather than ambush hunters or pure prey species." She held up a data pad. "Every attack has proven my thesis. Humans don't just fight. We learn. We adapt. We evolve. And most importantly, we share what we learn. Every failed attempt on my life has been analyzed, documented, and distributed to every human settlement in the galaxy." The footage ended with Dr. Hayes speaking to someone off-camera. "Send the data to Earth. Mark it as open source. Let everyone learn from this." Zark closed the archive with a heavy sigh. The final bounty had reached 50 million credits, but no one had dared to claim it. The target had turned the entire situation into a learning experience, not just for her station, but for all of humanity. The archive's final note told the real story. After the last attempt, Dr. Hayes had been offered a position as head of security research for the Human Defense Force. She had declined, choosing instead to continue her work in xenobiology. But now, she taught regular seminars on defense tactics, sharing everything she had learned from those who had tried to kill her. Humans, Zark muttered, closing the archive. They don't just survive. They take notes. Vexthor moved through the research station like a shadow, his active camouflage system bending light around his form with perfect precision. The legendary Scytheri assassin had never failed a contract in 300 years of hunting. His species had evolved to be the perfect killers. Retractable poison claws, infrared vision, and neural processing that made time seem to move slower during combat. The target, Dr. Amanda Hayes, was working late in her lab again. Through the transparent walls, he could see her reviewing data files, completely unaware of the death that stalked her. Or so he thought. "Mommy, the air looks funny by the door." Vexthor froze. A small human child, no more than 6 years old, stood in the lab's entrance pointing directly at him. Impossible. His camouflage system was perfect, tested against the visual range of every known species. Dr. Hayes didn't look up from her work. "What do you mean, Sophie? Show me like we practiced." The child walked over to a console and pressed several buttons. Suddenly, fine mist began spraying from the ceiling vents. The droplets caught on Vexthor's camouflage field, creating a perfect outline of his form. Pattern recognition test complete. An automated voice announced, "Anomaly confirmed. Security Protocol Hayes 7 now active." Vexthor's combat training took over. He launched himself toward the target, claws extended. But Dr. Hayes was already moving, her reactions far faster than his intelligence reports had indicated. She grabbed her daughter and rolled behind a lab table that immediately deployed some kind of energy shield. "Interesting approach," Hayes called out, her voice steady. "But we've been expecting you. Sophie, remember what we discussed about the scientific method." The child's voice came through clear and excited. "First, we make a hypothesis." "That's right. And what's our hypothesis about our visitor?" "That their cloaking tech uses quantum field manipulation, which means it'll react to changes in local particle density." Vexthor's blood ran cold. They were treating this like a science experiment. Worse, the child had just accurately described the classified technology behind his camouflage system. The assassin leaped for the door, but it had already sealed. The mist in the room was getting thicker, and now it was changing color where it touched his cloaking field. They were mapping his every movement. "Sophie, what's the next step in the scientific method?" Hayes asked, as if this were nothing more than a teaching moment. "We test it. Can we use the special flower now?" "Go ahead, Sui. Remember your safety goggles." A panel in the ceiling opened, releasing a cloud of fine white powder. Vexthor watched in horror as it settled on his camouflage field, creating a perfect white outline of his form. But it wasn't just normal flour. The powder was beginning to react with his suit's energy field, creating tiny electrical discharges. "Hypothesis confirmed," Sophie announced proudly. "The quantum field is destabilizing, just like you said it would, Mom." Hayes nodded. "Excellent observation. Now, what does this tell us about our visitor's technology?" "That it's based on the same principles as the xenomorph samples we studied last week, but they didn't account for human pattern recognition or basic chemistry." Vexthor had heard enough. He reached for his emergency teleporter, but nothing happened. The powder had created some kind of interference field. Looking for this, Hayes held up a small device, We detected your teleporter's quantum signature the moment you entered the station. It's been deactivated. Really? Did you think we wouldn't learn from the last 3 attempts? The legendary assassin felt true fear for the first time in his career. These humans hadn't just prepared defenses. They'd turned his assassination attempt into a teaching opportunity. A child had seen through his perfect camouflage, had understanding of quantum physics, and was learning combat tactics as if it were nothing more than a school lesson. Now then, Hayes continued, her voice taking on a more serious tone. Sophie, go to Protocol Room 2 like we practiced. Mommy needs to have a discussion with our guest about the ethics of accepting contracts without proper research. As the child skipped away, Hayes pressed another button. The white powder in the air began to glow, and Vexthor realized too late that it wasn't just for tracking. It was the delivery system for something far more sophisticated. Let's talk about why targeting a human research station, Hayes said calmly, is a very, very poor career choice. Station Epsilon's main control room had transformed overnight. Where once stood scientific workstations now sat improvised command terminals. Dr. Hayes watched as her fellow researchers, maintenance workers, and even the cafeteria staff moved with purposeful efficiency. The station's speakers crackled to life, playing "Another One Bites the Dust," the unofficial anthem of their defense force. "Status report," she called out, watching multiple holographic displays tracking movement throughout the station. Dr. Rodriguez, usually a quiet botanist, now commanded the defense grid like a veteran general. 3 more hostiles entered through the cargo bay. They're using some kind of new stealth tech, but it can't hide their heat signatures from our modified plant growth sensors. The research station had become a death trap for would-be assassins, but not through advanced military technology. Instead, the humans had turned their scientific equipment into weapons with terrifying creativity. "They're heading toward Section C," called out Jenkins, a maintenance worker who'd rigged the station's waste recycling system to deploy caustic compounds on command. "Should we spring the physics lab trap?" Hayes smiled. The physics lab had been Dr. Chen's idea, using the lab's particle accelerator to create localized magnetic fields strong enough to rip weapons right out of the attacker's hands. Not yet. Let's see if they fall for the cafeteria gambit first. In the kitchen, Chef Martinez had turned his domain into a chemical warfare zone. Common cooking ingredients, when combined under his expert direction, created non-lethal but extremely effective deterrents. The entire cafeteria was rigged with pressurized dispensers filled with his special hot sauce, a concoction that could penetrate most environmental suits. Movement in the hydroponics bay, Rodriguez updated. Looks like they're trying to access the environmental controls. Perfect. Hayes nodded to Dr. Watson, their climatologist. Show them why that's a bad idea. Watson had reprogrammed the climate control systems to create localized pressure differentials that could incapacitate most species. She'd based it on her research into gas giant weather patterns. Initiating Protocol Thunderstorm, she announced with professional glee. The station's cameras showed the results. 3 highly trained assassins, their stealth fields useless against the sudden atmospheric changes, were slammed against the walls as carefully calculated air pressure waves pummeled them into submission. "We've got more coming in through the medical bay," someone shouted. "They've got shield tech." Hayes turned to Dr. Park, their quantum physicist. "Time to test your theory about shield harmonics." Park was already moving. "The MRI machines are ready. Modified them to generate focused pulse waves that should disrupt any known shield technology. Been wanting to test this since we analyzed the last batch of failed assassination attempts." The entire station worked as one organism, each department contributing their expertise to the defense. The genetics lab had created bioluminescent bacteria that would reveal invisible intruders. The engineering team had converted their testing equipment into early warning systems. Even the janitorial staff had developed new cleaning compounds that could disable advanced combat armor. "Contact in Section E," Rodriguez called out. "They're using some kind of neural disruptor." "Release the mice," Hayes ordered, and several staff members grinned. The mice were actually small maintenance robots reprogrammed by Sophie and the other station children. The kids had spent their free time teaching the robots to play hide-and-seek, inadvertently creating the perfect hunter-killer drones. The small machines scurried through the ventilation system, using their simple programming to track and harass the intruders. "You know what the best part is?" Hayes asked, as they watched the chaos unfold. "Every single thing we're using against them was originally designed for peaceful research. We're not warriors. We're scientists who got very, very good at applying our knowledge." The station's speakers switched to "Don't Stop Believin'," as another group of assassins found themselves trapped in the quantum physics lab, where Dr. Park's modified equipment had created a localized time dilation field. They weren't hurt. They just moved very, very slowly. "Should we tell them?" Jenkins asked with a grin. "That everything they're experiencing will be published in next month's scientific journals?" Hayes shook her head, watching as the last group of intruders stumbled into the trap in the biology department. "Let them figure it out themselves." After all, she added as the defense systems activated once again, "That's how science works." The Mercenary Coalition's command ship hung in space like a predatory beast, its hull bristling with weapons. Inside, Commander Vexnar addressed the assembled elite strike teams, the deadliest hunters from 17 different species. "No more subtle approaches," he growled, displaying a hologram of Station Epsilon. "We hit them with everything. Overwhelm their defenses. Show them what real warriors can do." If only he'd known the humans were watching this very briefing, having already hacked the Coalition's secure communications the week before. In the station's converted command center, Dr. Hayes sipped her coffee while watching the enemy battle plans unfold. "They really don't learn, do they?" she mused. "Dr. Rodriguez, how's our welcome party coming along?" The botanist looked up from his modified plant growth chamber, now repurposed as a weapon she dubbed the Garden of Denial. "The spores are ready. Non-lethal, but they'll bind to any foreign environmental suit and start growing. The more they move, the faster the growth." Across the station, similar preparations were underway. The cafeteria staff had weaponized their food processors to create clouds of microscopic capsaicin crystals, hot enough to penetrate most filters. The maintenance team had rigged the artificial gravity to create localized zones of zero-G, while the medical staff had reprogrammed their cancer treatment radiation equipment to generate targeted EMP bursts. "First wave incoming," called out Dr. Park from her quantum computing station. "They're using some kind of phase shift technology to try to pass through our walls." Hayes nodded to the physics team. "Show them why that was a mistake." The phase-shifted mercenaries made it 3 feet through the station's hull before encountering the modified quantum field the physicists had created. Their advanced technology, designed to let them pass through solid matter, instead left them stuck between phases, not quite solid, not quite energy. "Don't worry," Hayes called out to the now trapped attackers. "The effect wears off in about 6 hours. We'll make sure you're comfortable while you wait." The second wave came through the main airlocks, using brute force and shield technology. They were met by what the engineering department called their symphony of destruction, precisely calibrated sound waves that created interference patterns with their shield frequencies. "They're adapting," someone shouted as the third wave deployed some kind of sound-dampening technology. "Good," Hayes smiled. "That means they're using the exact countermeasures we planned for. Dr. Watson, would you like to demonstrate your new theory about atmospheric pressure cascades?" The climatologist had been waiting for this moment. She'd taken her research on gas giant weather systems and turned it into a station-wide defense network. With a few keystrokes, she created a series of precisely controlled pressure differentials that turned every corridor into a wind tunnel. Meanwhile, the genetics lab released their latest creation, harmless bioluminescent bacteria that were attracted to the specific power signatures of the Mercenary's equipment. Within minutes, every infiltrator glowed like a Christmas tree. "Mom." Sophie's voice came through the comm system from her safe room, where she and the other children had been monitoring the station's newly reprogrammed maintenance robots. "They're trying to use the service tunnels. Can we show them our robot dance party?" Hayes laughed. "Go ahead, sweetie. Just remember to record the data for your science project." The service tunnels erupted with the sound of staying alive, as hundreds of small maintenance robots, their simple programming modified by children's play routines, swarmed the infiltrators. The robots weren't dangerous. They just really wanted to dance with their new friends. "Final wave incoming," Park announced. They're using modified medical scanning technology to map our defenses." "Perfect." Hayes pressed a button, sending out a station-wide message. "Attention Coalition forces. Thank you for testing our defense systems. As per scientific protocol, all data collected during this encounter will be published in next month's Journal of Applied Xenotechnology. We've taken the liberty of adding your names as unwitting test subjects. Peer review can be rather brutal, can't it?" The retreat that followed was almost comical. The coalition forces, realizing they'd just become part of a scientific study, fled as though the very laws of physics were against them. Which, thanks to Dr. Park's latest experiments in quantum mechanics, they actually were. The coalition's surviving leaders gathered in the secure briefing room of their flagship, each bearing the marks of their failed assault. Commander Vexnar played the recording they'd retrieved from Station Epsilon's research archives, his claws trembling slightly as Dr. Hayes' voice filled the room. Project Log. Human Evolutionary Analysis. Entry 247. Today's failed assassination attempt provides further evidence for our unique development path. While most species evolved to fill specific survival niches, humanity took a different route. The assembled mercenaries watched as Hayes walked through her lab, displaying holographic comparisons of different species evolution. The Sithari evolved for perfect stealth, the Krovaks for overwhelming strength, the Myraxians for information processing. But humans? We evolved to adapt. She gestured to a display showing ancient Earth. Our planet was chaos. Climate shifts, predators, natural disasters. We didn't become the strongest or the fastest. Instead, we became the most adaptable. Every challenge was a puzzle to solve, every threat an opportunity to learn. Vexnar paused the recording. This explains their defense strategies. They don't just fight back. They evolve their tactics in real time. A Myraxian analyst slithered forward, her crystalline scales still dulled from exposure to the station's defensive spores. Analysis of their response times shows something unprecedented. Each failed attack actually makes them stronger. They don't just learn from victory. They learn even more from failure. The recording continued, showing Hayes examining data from previous assassination attempts. Consider the timeline. Humans went from using stone tools to building starships in less than 10,000 years, not because we're smarter or stronger, but because each generation built upon the last's knowledge. We never stop learning, never stop adapting. A Krovaks warrior slammed his armored fist on the table. But they're scientists. Researchers. They should not be able to defeat warriors bred for combat. That's just it. A junior analyst spoke up, reading from a recovered datapad. Look at these brain scans. When humans face a threat, their neural pathways don't just light up in combat centers. Their entire brain engages. Pattern recognition, problem solving, creative centers, all working in perfect harmony. The recording showed Hayes demonstrating this point. Every human is a potential warrior, because every human is a problem solver. Give us a laboratory. We'll do research, threaten us, and that same lab becomes an arsenal. Our children learn combat through play. Our scientists turn research tools into weapons. Our maintenance workers see defense potential in every system they repair. Vexnar watched as the recording displayed footage from their failed assault. Look how they used our own technology against us. Each team that failed gave them new tools to study, new methods to counter. They didn't just defeat us. They used us as test subjects for their evolution. The Myraxian analyst brought up another display. Most concerning is their information sharing. Within hours of our retreat, every human settlement in the galaxy had received detailed reports of our tactics and their countermeasures. They're all learning, all adapting, all the time. Hayes' voice continued from the recording. The most beautiful part of human evolution isn't our individual adaptability. It's our collective learning. We don't just pass on our genes. We pass on our knowledge, our experiences, our solutions. Every human benefits from the lessons learned by others. The recording showed her final notes. Today's failed assassination attempt has provided valuable data on 7 new technologies, 3 previously unknown species combat techniques, and 12 potential improvements to our defense systems. As per human scientific tradition, all findings will be published and shared freely. Special thanks to our unwitting test subjects. Vexnar shut off the recording with a heavy sigh. We never stood a chance. They weren't just defending themselves. They were studying us, learning from us, evolving with every attack. And now every human in the galaxy knows exactly how to counter our best tactics. The junior analyst finished. They've done what their species has always done. Turned a threat into an opportunity for growth. In the corner, a battle-scared veteran laughed softly. You know what's really terrifying? This was just one station of scientists. Imagine what would happen if we ever met their actual warriors. The Galactic Scientific Council's emergency session had drawn representatives from every major species. On the central display, Dr. Hayes' research paper titled Persistence Predation, The Human Evolutionary Advantage, commanded everyone's attention. The recent events at Station Epsilon had transformed a routine xenobiology study into the most controversial scientific publication of the decade. Her core thesis is revolutionary, the Myraxian chief scientist explained, her crystalline form refracting light. As she moved, humans are the only known species to evolve through persistence hunting, the practice of pursuing prey until it collapses from exhaustion. The gathered scientists watched footage from ancient Earth, human hunters following tracks for days, keeping their prey moving, never letting it rest. Then, side by side, security footage from Station Epsilon showed modern humans using the same techniques against would-be assassins. Notice the patterns. Dr. Hayes' voice narrated over the footage. Our ancestors didn't need to be the strongest or fastest. They just needed to be relentless. This same trait now manifests in everything we do. Research, defense, even learning itself. The Krovax representative shifted uncomfortably, but they were supposed to be easy targets, soft, vulnerable. That was your first mistake, a human observer named Dr. Chen commented from his seat. You saw our physical form and assumed weakness. You never asked why a species without natural weapons or armor managed to survive long enough to reach the stars. The presentation continued, showing neural scans of human brains during various activities. Whether we're hunting, researching, or defending ourselves, Hayes' voice explained. Humans engage the same neural pathways. We track, we analyze, we adapt, and most importantly, we never stop. Security footage from the station showed how the humans had systematically dismantled each assassination attempt. They hadn't just defended. They'd studied their attackers, learned their patterns, and adapted their defenses in real time. Look at their response to the Coalition's attack, the Myraxian scientist pointed out. They didn't just survive. They turned the entire assault into a research opportunity. Every failed attempt provided data for their studies. Dr. Chen nodded. That's the key point of Hayes' research. Humans don't just learn from success. We learn even more from failure. Each failed attack made the station's defenses stronger. They were using the same persistence hunting techniques our ancestors use, wearing down their prey through relentless adaptation. The presentation shifted to show how Station Epsilon had modified their scientific equipment for defense. Notice how they repurposed everything. Hayes' voice continued. Medical scanners became threat detection systems. Climate control became a weapon. Even the children's games with maintenance robots turned into defense strategies. But the most crucial finding, Dr. Chen added, is how this ties into our social structure. Persistence hunting required cooperation, communication, and information sharing. Today, that same trait means every human settlement benefits from the lessons learned at Station Epsilon. The final segment of Hayes' research showed a time-lapse of human history, from stone tools to starships. Our species didn't evolve to be the best at any one thing, her voice concluded. We evolved to never stop improving. Every challenge is a hunt, every problem a prey to be pursued, until we solve it. The Galactic Council sat in stunned silence as the presentation ended. Finally, the Myraxian scientists spoke. The implications are clear. The mercenary attacks on Station Epsilon weren't just failed assassination attempts. They were unwitting participants in proving Dr. Hayes' theory about human evolution. Dr. Chen stood, a slight smile on his face. You know what the real irony is? If they'd never tried to kill her, Dr. Hayes might have taken years to prove her thesis. Instead, they provided perfect case studies of human persistence and adaptability in action. The council chamber's display showed one final image. Station Epsilon's new warning beacon, broadcasting on all frequencies. Warning, Human Research Station. All hostile actions will be studied, analyzed, and published in peer-reviewed journals. Approach at your own risk. Kizark stood before the same contract board where our story began, but everything had changed. The neon-lit underbelly of Station Nexus 7 hummed with a different energy now. Where once assassination contracts filled the display, a new type of posting dominated the board. Seeking human security consultants for corporate research facility. Human protection details needed for diplomatic mission. Research station requires human safety advisors. The veteran Draconid assassin watched as a group of human contractors reviewed the offerings, their casual demeanor belying their newfound status as the galaxy's most sought-after security experts. Quite the change, isn't it? A familiar voice made him turn. Dr. Amanda Hayes stood there, looking more like a professor than the woman who had systematically dismantled the galaxy's most elite mercenary teams. She was teaching a seminar on station security at the local university. I never expected to see you here, Kizark admitted, his hand unconsciously touching the scars on his neck. Hayes smiled. I'm giving a guest lecture on adaptive defense strategies in research environments. Several major corporations are attending. They're particularly interested in how we turn scientific equipment into defense systems. The contract board updated with a new posting. Warning: attacks on human facilities will be treated as voluntary participation in defense research. All data collected will be published. You know what the really interesting part is? Hayes gestured to a group of mixed-species security teams training together. They're actually learning from us now. Not just our defensive techniques, but our approach to problem-solving. Kizark watched as a human instructor demonstrated how to turn common laboratory equipment into security systems. The students, former mercenaries and assassins, took notes with the same intensity they once reserved for combat training. Your daughter Sophie, Kizark remembered the child who had spotted a cloaked assassin. How is she? Hayes beamed with pride. She just published her first paper in the Journal of Applied Defense Technologies, Learning Through Play, Adaptive Programming in Security Robotics. She used the data from those dancing maintenance bots that drove your coalition forces crazy. The station's main display showed footage from various research facilities across the galaxy. Each had adopted elements of what was now called the Hayes Protocol, the integration of scientific research and adaptive defense. But more than that, they'd embraced the human approach to learning and innovation. "We're not actually better warriors than anyone else," Hayes explained, watching a mixed team of humans and aliens run a security drill. "We're just really good at learning from everything and everyone around us, including our enemies." A new alert flashed across the board. Reminder: all security personnel are required to attend tomorrow's seminar on creative problem-solving in defense scenarios by Dr. Hayes. "You've changed everything," Kizark noted. "Not just security, but how species interact with each other." Hayes shook her head. "We just showed them a different way to look at problems. Now, instead of competing, we're all learning from each other. Even former assassins are finding new purpose as security consultants and trainers." The station's security chief, a former coalition commander, approached with a group of trainees. "Dr. Hayes, would you mind explaining to my team how you turned our phase shift technology against us? It's become a classic case study in adaptive defense." "Of course," she agreed, then turned back to Kizark. "Care to join us? Your experience could add valuable perspective to the discussion." Kizark found himself following, realizing that this was humanity's greatest strength, not their ability to fight, but their talent for turning enemies into students, threats into lessons, and combat into collaboration. The final notice on the contract board summed up the new reality of their galaxy. The most dangerous predator is the one that never stops learning. Humanity didn't just survive our attacks. They evolved because of them. And now, they're teaching us how to evolve too. Below it, someone had added a handwritten note that made even Kizark smile. "Today's enemy is tomorrow's study group. Bring snacks and an open mind."